So fellas, the pound-for-pound rankings have changed quite drastically since the end of 2023, so I thought I'd predict what the UFC top 15 pound-for-pound rankings are going to look like by the end of 2025. So predicting title fights, fighters that are going to fall off, fighters that are going to have a come-up, just everything to do with the top 15 pound-for-pound list by the end of 2025, see how much it's changed and how I expect it to look by the end of 2025. And we'll go in there with the first placement with number 15th, and I'm going Arman Tsarukyan. I think Arman Tsarukyan's going to make it into this pound-for-pound top 15. I know it might be quite too early to say this because he's obviously not even had a title fight yet, but I think he will be number 15 pound-for-pound in the world by the end of 2025. Obviously, I don't think he's going to be in the... Well, he's currently not in the pound-for-pound list yet, but I do think he'll be number 15th. Now, if we look at some potential matchups from in 2025, obviously he's got the fight with Islam Makhachev for the belt at UFC 311, and he's got a good chance of beating Makhachev. You know, he's got amazing wrestling. His stand-up's pretty crisp as well. He's the only other guy to beat Oliveira recently at 155 apart from Makhachev, but I'm still going to pick Makhachev to beat Tsarukyan. I'm not going to be delusional. He's beaten him before well, not pretty comfortably, but he has beaten Arman Tsarukyan before, and he's submitting submission artists. He's got the best wrestling in the UFC. He's knocked out Volkanovski. He's the most complete fighter in the UFC right now. I've got to go with Makhachev to beat Tsarukyan, even though Tsarukyan has a lot of potential. And obviously, he's not going to get ranked in the pound-for-pound list for losing to Islam Makhachev. But I don't think it's going to halt his ability to get ranked too much because Makhachev's number one in the division. But I think for Tsarukyan, he's going to kind of take the role of being the second best in the lightweight division. We have Volkanovski number one, and we used to have Volkanovski number one and Holloway number two. We had Usman number one and Colby number two. We had Adesanya number one and Whittaker number two. I think that's going to be the case in the lightweight division where Makhachev is just the best lightweight in the world. No one can beat him, while Arman Tsarukyan is just gatekeeping that number one spot. And it's like a permanent number one guy in the division. If we look at some more potential matches for Tsarukyan, I don't actually know who he fights when he loses to Makhachev, because if we look at the current rankings of the lightweight division, he's already fought Oliveira. I don't think the UFC would do Gaethje or Poirier versus Tsarukyan. I think they're going to have like one last scrap for a retirement fight. Holloway's probably going to fight Oliveira. It could be Dan Hooker, so I think for Tsarukyan, his next matchup, if he does lose to Makhachev, which he probably does, will probably be Dan Hooker, or maybe the winner of Fiziev and Gamrot. There's been a fight for UFC Saudi Arabia apparently in the works between Fiziev and Gamrot. If he ends up fighting Dan Hooker, listen, Dan Hooker's tough. He looked amazing against Gamrot and he has amazing takedown defense, but Tsarukyan would maul him respectfully. He's the second best wrestler in this weight class. I think Tsarukyan beats Dan Hooker, not comfortably, but I do think he definitely wins that fight. And then if it is the winner of Gamrot and Fiziev, I think he not destroys Fiziev, but I think he definitely out-wrestles Fiziev. I mean, if it's Gamrot, I mean, we've seen this fight before. It was a very close fight, but I think Tsarukyan should have won the fight. And his resume already, even if he doesn't get another win after the Makhachev, I mean, he's beaten Oliveira, who's in the pound-for-pound list. He's beaten a ranked Yoel Alvarez. He ranked Benil Dariush. Matt Frevola as well. If you can go there and beat a Dan Hooker as well, or maybe a Fiziev, that's another big win for Arman Tsarukyan. So I think he will be number 15 pound-for-pound by the end of 2025, just because of the body of work that he would have put in the lightweight division and secured himself the number one contender, just behind Islam Makhachev, and the fact that he's already beaten Oliveira, who's in the pound-for-pound list too. At number 14th, I'm going Sean O'Malley. Sugar Sean O'Malley, I think, will be number 14th in the pound-for-pound list by the end of 2025. He's currently number 13th in the division. I think he will move one down to number 14th. Now, some potential matchups for Sean O'Malley. I think his next fight will be, or at least should be, against Petr Yan. We've seen this fight before. It was a super back-and-forth fight. They both did very well in that fight to the point where it was a super close fight. A lot of people thought it was a very controversial decision, which just shows how close the fight was. And I think now that Petr Yan's on a 2-fight winning streak, Sean O'Malley's just lost to Merab for the belt, I think it's the perfect time to do a rematch between the two of them, and the winner can get a title shot, because I'd say they're both probably a fight away from a title shot, or at least that's the UFC views it, how the UFC views it, because Sean O'Malley, the UFC are going to want him to get in a title fight as soon as possible. Beating Yan is the way to do that, and I think it depends on how good O'Malley's takedown defense is. Is he sharp on the feet? Is Yan looking like he did against Figueiredo? It's a very, very close fight. I'm leaning towards O'Malley winning, though. I know Petr Yan's looked amazing in his past too, but I'm leaning towards O'Malley winning. I just think O'Malley's still one of the best in the division. Not that Petr Yan isn't, I've got to side with O'Malley this one stylistically. And I think, obviously, if he does win that fight, he's probably going to stay at number 13th pound-for-pound. I don't think he's going to get higher on the pound-for-pound list by beating Petr Yan. But if we look at some other matchups for him, let's say he does beat Petr Yan, it's got to be the winner of Merab and Umar Nurmagomedov. If he rematches Merab, unless he catches Merab coming in like he did with Sterling, I think Merab beats him the exact same way, takes him down multiple times, has an insane takedown output, and just basically beats Sean O'Malley the same way by decision, by wrestling. And then if he faces Umar Nurmagomedov, he's fucked, because Umar is probably the worst matchup stylistically for Sean O'Malley. So either way, let's say he beats Petr Yan, I don't think he beats the winner of Merab and Umar Nurmagomedov. So I don't think O'Malley becomes a champion, which is probably going to knock him down a point on the pound-for-pound list to number 14th. So I think 14th will be Sean O'Malley, even though his resume is not bad. If he does beat Petr Yan again, that's 2 wins over Petr Yan. A win over Sterling when Sterling was the best bantamweight, and also Marlon Vera in the mix too. So I think O'Malley will be number 14th. At 13th, I think Charles Oliveira will be number 13th now. He's currently number 15th, which I think is actually kind of criminal. I don't see how Sean Strickland and even Sean O'Malley are above Charles Oliveira. So I think Oliveira will move down to number 13th in division by the end of 2025. If you look at some potential matchups, I know there's been a rumoured fight with Ilia Topuria. I don't think the UFC are going to do that way. I don't think the UFC are going to waste Topuria on a non-title fight. So I think Topuria's next fight is probably going to be against a featherweight contender, whilst Oliveira faces the winner of Islam Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan. That's what I think Oliveira's probably going to do next in his career. He's already had a very, very close fight with Tsarukyan that could go either way, but I think Makhachev, like I said, will beat Tsarukyan, and we're going to see a rematch between Oliveira and Islam Makhachev, and I'm going to have to go with Makhachev. We've seen this fight before, and it wasn't even close. Makhachev dominated him in every single department of MMA, and I know Oliveira looked good with the wrestling against Michael Chandler, but with all due respect, Michael Chandler and Islam Makhachev are completely different playing fields. So I think Makhachev beats Oliveira again. I don't think Oliveira necessarily gets kicked out the rankings for losing to Makhachev because, like I said, Makhachev's number 1 in the pound-for-pound list. It's not like he's lost to another contender. He's lost to literally the best fighter in the world. So I think he'll stay at number 15th. And if you look at his resume already on top of that, he's beaten Chandler twice, Dariush, Poirier, Gaethje. He's near enough cleared out the lightweight division apart from Makhachev and obviously Arman Tsarukyan in a very close fight. So I think his fight after the Makhachev loss is probably going to be against a fun contender like a Max Holloway or a Dan Hooker. Listen, Dan Hooker likes bringing everyone to hell. Very tough guy. And Max Holloway, especially how he looked against Gaethje, he's one of the best 155 contenders. But I see Oliveira submitting both of them. I think his grappling, especially with the new implementation of wrestling, is just going to be too much for both of them. And even on the feet, he's very dangerous there too. So I think he beats either Max Holloway or Dan Hooker, and we'll get that number 13th pound-for-pound list after he's already cleared out the lightweight division near enough. So I think Oliveira's going to end off the year at number 13th pound-for-pound. At number 12, I think will be Max Holloway himself now. Max Holloway is number 12 right now, and I think he's going to stay at number 12 in 2025. I don't think he's going to get any higher or lower. If you look at some potential matchups, like I've just said, there's a fight between Oliveira that could potentially happen if Oliveira loses to Makhachev, which he probably will. They're probably going to do Oliveira versus Max Holloway for a fun fight, and I see Oliveira winning that fight. I think he takes him down and gets the submission. He's got an amazing submission ability, and even on the feet, he's a threat. So I do see Oliveira beating Max Holloway, in which Max Holloway is probably going to drop a couple of stages on the pound-for-pound list. Maybe number 13th or 14th, he's going to go down a few spots. But I think he's going to change that because if he fights Oliveira and loses, I think after that, they're not going to do Max Holloway versus a dangerous lightweight wrestler like a Tsarukyan or, they're not going to give him like a Gamrot. They're going to give him a fun fight. And I think it'll be either Chandler, Dan Hooker. I know I keep matchmaking Dan Hooker against everyone, but it'll be either Hooker, Chandler, or Fiziev, who I think Holloway's next fight will be after Oliveira. If it's Michael Chandler, the dude's 2-4 in the UFC, Holloway boxes his head off. If it's Dan Hooker, Hooker's tough, but after I saw Holloway versus Gaethje, I'm 100% picking Holloway to win that fight. And if it's Fiziev, that's a very, very fun matchup. That'd be one of the best fights you can make at 155 right now, but I've got to back Max Holloway. And the UFC usually rewards people who have done good in 2 different weight classes on the pound-for-pound list. Like Max Holloway, he's got a great resume at featherweight. If he can put together a bit of a resume at 155 and beat a contender there as well as Gaethje, I think he's going to earn that number 12 spot. I think he's going to stay in that number 12 spot. So I'm going Max Holloway to stay ranked number 12 in the pound-for-pound list by the end of 2025. At number 11, I'm going with Rocky Edwards. Leon Edwards, I think, will go down a couple of spots to number 11. He's currently ranked number 10th. Well, technically tied 9th, but it's 10th in it. So he's currently ranked 10th. I think he'll move down a spot to number 11. Some potential matchups. I think his next fight is going to be against Sean Brady. I think the UFC are going to do Sean Brady because if you look at the welterweight rankings right now, Shavkat's going to be getting a title shot. Usman's already fought Leon 3 times. JDM's probably booked for UFC 312. Buckley and Gary have just fought. The only real contender left is Sean Brady. He's coming off a win. So I think they're going to do Sean Brady versus Leon Edwards in London. I think it's in February or March for UFC Fight Night. This could be a bad matchup for Leon, he just got dominated by Belal Muhammad, and Usman gave him a lot of grappling problems, and now we're giving him a very high-level jiu-jitsu grappler, but he's got solid takedown defense. I feel like Leon, after the Belal fight, people are disrespecting the takedown defense they displayed before, and I can't pick a guy that got finished by Belal Muhammad on the feet to pick Leon Edwards. So I'm picking Leon Edwards to win a comfortable decision over Sean Brady in London and get back in the winning column, which is probably going to keep him at number 10th in the pound-for-pound list. I don't think he's going to necessarily, increase it. He's definitely not going to get higher than Pantoja for beating Sean Brady, but I think he'll stay at number 10th. And then after that, I don't really know who he fights because I don't even know if he's going to fight again because he's fairly an inactive fighter, an average fighting once a year. So I don't even know if he fights again, but considering it is fairly early on in 2025, I think he'll have 2 fights. And I think his next fight after Sean Brady will probably be against Buckley Gary or Shavkat. They're not going to give him a title fight. The UFC don't really want Leon near the belt, so I reckon it'll be against Buckley, Gary or Shavkat. Buckley, this dangerous, explosive striker with dangerous, explosive wrestling. That's a bad matchup for Leon. Ian Gary, technical striker who's underrated in the grappling, and Shavkat has the capabilities to beat anyone. So I don't even know if I'd favour Leon to beat an Ian Gary, a Buckley, or a Shavkat at this moment in time. I don't even know if he does fight again in 2025. So I think the safe space is to put Leon at number 11, beat Sean Brady, and either stays out for too long to the point where he gets knocked down a point, or he loses against another contender. I really don't know if Leon can get past a Buckley, or a Shavkat, or a Gary, or even a JDM, so I'm going to say for Leon Edwards, he's going to get number 11 pound for pound by the end of 2025. And then at number 10, I'm going with Merab. Yeah, I think Merab's going to get knocked down a few placements. Merab's currently ranked number 7th in the pound-for-pound list, and I think he's going to get knocked down all the way to number 10th in the list, which might have seemed like a big drop, and I'll explain why. Well, if we look at his potential matchups, he's going to be taking on Umar Nurmagomedov at UFC 311 for the belt, and I do think Umar beats him. Umar's a much better striker. I think the fight's going to be taking place predominantly on the feet, in which Nurmagomedov's going to win because he's a much better striker, and I think Nurmagomedov's probably the best fighter right now in the UFC when it comes to mixing up the striking with the grappling. He does an amazing job at it, and I just think overall, he's a more dangerous wrestler than Merab. I think he's going to keep the fight on the feet and make it a stand-up fight in which he wins. So I'm picking Nurmagomedov to beat Merab. And I think from that, Merab's probably going to get put down all the way to number 9, which might seem like a big drop for only one loss, but the UFC are really strict when it comes to the top 10 pound-for-pound list. Like, if you're in the top 10 of the pound-for-pound list, all it takes is one loss, and you could be kicked out all the way to, like, I don't know, like, let's say you're number 5 in the pound-for-pound list. If you lose a fight, you might not even be in the top 10 anymore. So there's a very strict criteria. But then after that, some potential matchups after Umar Nurmagomedov for Merab when it's not for the belt. I think it's probably after the Umar loss, he's going to take on either Sandhagen or Davison Figueiredo. Maybe they do Figgy versus Sandhagen, the winner fights Merab. If he ends up fighting Figgy, I think he beats him. Figgy, he struggled a little bit with the wrestling against Peter Yan. I can only imagine what Merab's going to do to him. I think Merab would probably maul Davison Figueiredo. And if he fights Corey Sandhagen, that's a really tough fight to choose because Sandhagen's got amazing takedown defense and he's sharp on the feet. That's a very tough matchup. I'll probably lean towards Merab winning, but I think Merab will be at number 10. I still think he'll be top 10 pound for pound even after taking the loss to Umar, because he has got a pretty good resume at 135, but I'm going to say number 10 for Merab. Loses to Umar, maybe picks him up when he gets another contender, but because of the pound for pound top 10 is so competitive, I think he'll be staying at number 10. And then number 9, I'm going with Dricus du Plessis, another guy that I expect to have a bit of a fall off in the pound for pound rankings. He's currently ranked number 6 in the division. I think he's going to get dropped down to number 9. If we look at his next matchup, it's going to be against Sean Strickland at UFC 312. Going to be taking on Sean Strickland at 312. And obviously, we saw the first fight, Dricus du Plessis, and I mean, they both went out there and had a war where Dricus du Plessis won a very close decision. But the reason I think Dricus wins again is because of his improvements. Dricus is constantly improving. In the Whittaker fight, he improved his striking. In the Strickland fight, he improved his stamina. In the Adesanya fight, he showed and improved the grappling. He's constantly improving and making adjustments in every single one of his fights. Whereas Sean Strickland, he has the exact same style and game plan in every single one of his fights. And it is working because he's obviously a top contender, but I feel like Dricus is going to be the one that's making the necessary adjustments. I think he's going to be the one that's improving the most. And I can see Dricus du Plessis being the one to beat Sean Strickland even more comfortably in the rematch, which might even put him in the top 5. And you're probably wondering why I've dropped him all the way down to number 9. And I think that's because his matchup after Strickland is going to be against none other than Khamzat Chimaev. He's definitely earned a title shot after mauling Robert Whittaker. I think they're going to do Chimaev versus Dricus du Plessis. And if you look at Dricus's most recent fights, it's all big against strikers. Izzy, Strickland, Whittaker, all of them strikers. And the last time he faced a grappler in Derek Brunson was actually doing a lot of, not damage, but he was actually controlling Dricus du Plessis with the wrestling. He was giving Dricus a lot of wrestling problems in that fight. And even Robert Whittaker landed a takedown against Dricus du Plessis in their fight. I can only imagine what Chimaev might be able to do with the wrestling against Dricus du Plessis. Not that Dricus is a bad wrestler. Like I said, he improved it a lot in the Adesanya fight, but Chimaev's on a completely different level. I think Chimaev will have a pretty comfortable time taking Dricus down, and I can just see Chimaev getting a submission and winning the belt. So I think Chimaev's going to beat Dricus du Plessis, and because of that, Dricus is going to get dropped down to number 9. Like I said, the pound for pound list is super competitive. All it takes is one loss and you get dropped down quite a bit. So I think we're going to see Dricus du Plessis get moved down to number 9, which brings me on to number 8, which is going to be Khamzat Chimaev himself. Obviously, currently not ranked in the pound for pound list, but I think he will end off the year at number 8 in 2025. Now, if we look at his potential matchups, I think his next fight, like I just said, will be against the winner of Dricus and Strickland. If he fights Dricus, he wins. Even if he faces Strickland and Strickland beats Dricus, easy fight for Chimaev. That's an easy. He mauls Sean Strickland. But even if he does fight Dricus du Plessis, like I said, I think he mauls Dricus, takes him down, gets the submission, beats Dricus du Plessis, and he will end off the year at number 8. Now, The reason I've said ended off the year at number 8 is because when it comes to potential matchups after that, I don't know if we're going to see Chimaev compete even twice in 2025 because he's got this issue going on where he can't fight outside the USA. So I think they're going to do him versus Dricus probably towards the second half of 2025 in Abu Dhabi or Saudi Arabia. And he's on average fighting once a year. And like I said, he can't really fight outside of Abu Dhabi. The UFC only tends to go to Abu Dhabi pay-per-view once a year. So I think they're going to do Chimaev versus Dricus. Chimaev beats Dricus du Plessis, becomes the middleweight champion, but then doesn't fight again in 2025. So I think Chimaev, the safe space is to say that he's going to be number 8th in the pound-for-pound list after beating Dricus du Plessis, but he doesn't necessarily go any higher because I just don't see him competing again. Number 7, I think, will be Alexandre Pantoja. Pantoja is currently number 9th. I don't really agree with that, but he's number 9th, and I think he will move up to number 7 in the pound-for-pound list. And there's going to be people in the comments saying, what about number 5? Why? He should be pound-for-pound number 5. He's going to be in the top 5. I disagree, and I'll explain why. If we look at some potential matchups for Pantoja, there's recently been a number 1 contender fight between Manel Kape and Brandon Royval that's been announced for March the 1st in 2025, which kind of assumes that Kai Kara-France is going to be getting the next title shot in the flyweight division. And if that's the case, I mean, we've seen this fight before. They fought at the Ultimate Fighter. Pantoja got a good win after a scrap, but that was 8 years ago. I understand. So let's take a look at some recent activity from the two of them. Kai Kara-France knocked out Steve Erceg, had a lot of grappling problems, lost a fight against Amir Abazi, and got finished by Brandon Moreno, while Pantoja has literally been on a tear in the flyweight division. I'm picking Pantoja to beat Kai Kara-France. I think he's just better. I think he'll mix it up with the grappling, make it into a dogfight, show him levels, and I'm not even entirely sure that Kai Kara-France has earned a title shot, and I don't think he's ready for Pantoja. Not necessarily that he's not ready, but I don't know if he's prepared based on his recent fight, so I'm picking Pantoja to beat Kai Kara-France, and after that, he's probably going to make it into the top 5. It'll be very difficult to see Pantoja not be in the top 5 if he can beat yet another contender in Kai Kara-France. And then after that, this is where I think he's going to make his move to the bantamweight division. I think he's going to fight the winner of Umar Nurmagomedov and Merab in the bantamweight division. And I think they both beat him because Steve Erceg took down Pantoja. Steve Erceg was the guy who took Pantoja down in that 5th round. If you're getting taken down by Steve Erceg, it's not looking like a good day when you're moving up a weight class to fight the 2 best wrestlers in that division, even in the UFC, against Merab and Umar Nurmagomedov. I think they both beat Pantoja, not necessarily easily. I think it both goes to a decision, but I think they both beat Pantoja, and because of that, Pantoja's going to drop down a few pound-for-pound list placements, and he's going to go to number 7 in the pound-for-pound list after losing to either Umar or Merab. And then at number 6, I think will be Umar Nurmagomedov himself. Now, I've already basically gone over how I think Umar's career is going to go in 2025, so it's going to be quite short. Is this segment? He's not in the pound-for-pound ranking currently. I think he'll be number 6. He's going to face Merab. I think he beats Merab, gets number 6 placement. And at this moment in time, he would have beaten Sandhagen and Merab, which is a pretty good 2 wins to have in the bantamweight division. After that, faces Pantoja coming up, Moores Pantoja, beats him, gets the number 7 spot because he just beat pound for pound one of the best, and he's number 7 in the division. Is Umar Nurmagomedov, pretty short and sweet. Then we've got number 5, Belal Muhammad. Remember the name, Belal Muhammad, I think will stay at number 5 in the pound for pound list come the end of 2025. Some potential matchups, it's got to be Shavkat next. Shavkat versus Gary was labelled as the number 1 contender fight. Shavkat won. He had a face-off with Belal Muhammad in the octagon. I mean, this fight was originally scheduled to be a title fight anyway, so it's definitely going to be Belal and Shavkat, and I think Belal beat Shavkat. I was actually saying this before the Shavkat-Gary fight even happened, and I'm even more confident now that Belal Muhammad beat Shavkat. He is probably the most relentless, or one of the most relentless grapplers right now in the UFC. His wrestling that he showed against Leon Edwards was on another level, and not even just against Leon, against every single one of the contenders that he goes against. He bullies them with the wrestling. And you've got Shavkat, who was basically holding Ian Gary against the cage for the first 2 rounds, struggling to take him down. Even Stephen Wonderboy Thompson displayed amazing takedown offense against Shavkat in their fight. On the feet, I'd say Shavkat's definitely the better striker, but it's not necessarily night and day because Belal Muhammad, I think, has got quite an underrated boxing game that he brings because of the threat of the takedown. But I think Belal Muhammad beat Shavkat. I do think he's got a better wrestling game than him. I can see him giving him grappling problems, especially after Ian Gary was able to take the back of Shavkat. And I think if he does beat Shavkat, he will stay at that number 5 pound-for-pound spot pretty comfortably. And then after that, his next fight will probably be against either Jack Della Maddalena or Buckley. Jack Della Maddalena, great boxer, but he did get taken down by Gilbert Burns, and I do think he's a little bit overrated. Is Jack Della Maddalena. I can see Belal giving him grappling problems. And Buckley is a nightmare matchup for Belal Muhammad in the division. Probably the worst stylistic matchup for Belal, but I think we're in the bully era. I think we're in the remember the name era. I do think Belal Muhammad will end off the year undefeated in 2025 and be number 5 pound-for-pound list after a successful 2025 for the Belal of the Bully Muhammad. And then number 4 is going to be Ilia Topuria. I think he stays at number 4 in the division, and I think he will stay like that coming into 2025. 2025 now. Some potential matchups for Topuria. I know, like I said, there's been a rumoured fight with Oliveira, and there's been some rumoured fights between Diego Lopez and Movsar Evloev. I think the UFC, knowing the UFC, they're probably going to throw Volkanovski straight back in the deep end and do Volkanovski versus Topuria 2. And I don't blame them. It's a big fight. Volkanovski kind of does deserve an immediate rematch, so I can see why they're doing it. They faced off in the octagon at UFC 308, so I can see that being the next fight they do. And I think Topuria chins Volkanovski again. He's done it the first time. He got him against the cage and put him out cold to sleep. And then since then, he's knocked out Max Holloway, whilst Volkanovski has done absolutely nothing since then, which rightfully so. He should have taken some time off, but this is only going to favour Topuria, so I'm picking Topuria to starch Volkanovski again, get once again another win against the former champion. And then after that, I think the UFC are going to create a super fight between Ilia Topuria and Islam Makhachev. They're going to let Topuria move up a weight class, face Islam Makhachev for the belt, in which I think Makhachev wins. Like I said before, Makhachev's pound-for-pound number 1, so I don't think it's necessarily going to kind of hurt Topuria's pound-for-pound placement too much. I think he'll stay at number 4 even if he does lose to Makhachev, but yeah, I think Topuria, he'll end off the year at number 4 pound-for-pound in the top 5 after a 1-1 record in that year. And then number 3, I think Alex Pereira will remain number 3 in the pound-for-pound list at the end of 2025. He's currently number 3, and I think it stays the same. Now, I don't think John Jones is going to be in the pound-for-pound list at the end of 2025, and I'll explain why as this video goes on. But for Alex Pereira, some potential matchups could be Magomed Ankalaev. I know we recently said on Twitter that he's not going to fight Ankalaev. That fight's not going to happen, but I think he's just trolling. If the UFC have any credibility, they are going to make this fight between Pereira and Ankalaev. And Ankalaev's a bad matchup, you know, he's got knockout power on the feet, but I do think he's, I don't know, I don't want to say overrated, but I don't think he's as good as people are making him out to be on the feet. People talk about him as if he's like the next best striker behind Yuri, but I just don't think he is. And when it comes to wrestling, I know he's got good wrestling that he showed against Jan Blachowicz, and he showed it against Nikita Krylov as well in a couple of his fights, but I think Poton beats Ankalaev. I know it's kind of like the hot take to pick the Dagestani dude over Alex Pereira because we can't have good things in MMA, but I'm going with Poton to win. He's definitely by far the better striker. I mean, he's definitely the best striker by far in the light heavyweight division, so if it stays predominantly on the feet, he could start him. I mean, Jan Blachowicz nearly finished Ankalaev with pure leg kicks in their fight in the second round. And if we look at the wrestling side of things, Ankalaev hasn't wrestled for ages. He didn't wrestle against Rakic or Walker. He slightly out-wrestled Jan Blachowicz and Anthony Smith back 2 years ago. And if you think that Poton hasn't improved his grappling with his work with Glover Teixeira, I would say that Poton's probably working on grappling more than anything in his training camps because of obviously the threat of the grappling that he didn't really have coming into the MMA, into the UFC. So I'm going Poton to beat Ankalaev. I think he knocks him out or at least wins. Now he's going to knock him out. Yeah, Pereira's knocking out Ankalaev in my opinion. He's going to keep that number 3 pound-for-pound spot at the end of 2025. And then after that, if we look at the light heavyweight division for me, Poton would have cleared it out. He would have beaten Ankalaev, Roundtree, Hill, Blachowicz, and Yuri twice. There's not really anyone else for him to fight at light heavyweight. Move him up to heavyweight against the winner of John Jones and Tom Aspinall. Now, if he fights John Jones, he's going to get mauled. John Jones is going to take him down in the first and finish him. So I think either or between Aspinall and Jones, they beat him. And if Aspinall fights him, Aspinall's going to beat him too. He's going to take him down and submit him. And even on the feet, Aspinall's got a big threat of too because he's just been knocking everyone out left, right, and centre. So I think either way, he's going to lose to a heavyweight, but I think he's going to keep that number 3 pound-for-pound spot in the pound-for-pound list. At number 2, call me a glazer. I don't care. I can already read the comments. Tom Aspinall will be number 2 pound-for-pound by the end of 2025. Come back to this video when he is. I'm telling you, man, Tom Aspinall's going to be pound-for-pound, at least top 3. I think he's going to be number 2 in the division at the end of 2025. He's currently number 8th in the division. He's the only guy in the pound-for-pound list right now, I think, who has never won an undisputed fight. But I think he's going to beat John Jones and take that number 2 spot. Obviously, his next matchup is going to be against John Jones. And if he does beat Jones, Jones is being hyped up as pound-for-pound number 1. That's what Dana White's saying everywhere. The pound-for-pound greatest fighter of all time, best fighter in the world, whatever. And they have to make the fight between Jones and Aspinall. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. He's going to knock him out. Aspinall will knock out John Jones. He is the best heavyweight we've ever seen from a skills perspective. And he is so much faster. Go and watch Aspinall versus Blades and then immediately watch John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. The speed difference is on a completely different level. Tom Aspinall's going to go out there and starch John Jones. I'm not going to do a full-blown prediction now because it's going to be too long, but he's going to beat him. I'm telling you, Aspinall is the new breed of heavyweight, not Cyril Gane, who can't even defend the takedown against bloody Volkov. It's the Aspinall era. Aspinall's going to beat John Jones. And because of that, he's going to probably make it in the top 3. I mean, if he beats John Jones, he's probably going to be top 3 pound for pound because he's been the first guy to legitimately beat John Jones, and he's beating pound for pound one of the best. So I'm going Aspinall to beat Jones and become pound for pound. And look at his resume already. He's already beaten 5 top 10 heavyweights right now. He beat Volkov, Pavlovich, Blade, Spivak, and Tavera. 5 guys in the top 10 he's beaten. If he beats Jones as well, that's 6, and he's beating one of the best pound for pound. And then after that, I think the UFC are going to make another super fight. Alex Pereira versus Tom Aspinall. And guess who's winning that? Tom Aspinall's winning, like I said before. And if he beats Alex Pereira, he's just beaten again one of the best pound for pound in the UFC. He's going to be number 2. He's going to beat Porton, who's number 3, Jones, who's number 2, and Tom Aspinall will end off the year as number 2 pound for pound in the world. Even if he just beat John Jones and he didn't even fight Alex Pereira and he faced like Volkov or Garn again and he beats them, he's still going to be number 2, so I'm pretty confident. You're going to call me a glazer, but I think the body of work that Tom Aspinall is going to put in the heavyweight division against Porton and Jones is going to earn him that number 2 spot, and he's going to end off the year as the 2nd best fighter in the UFC. And at number 1, it's got to be Makhachev. It's got to be Makhachev. It is a bit of a generic answer, but it has to be done. He's currently pound for pound number 1, and it's not changing. Like I said before, he's going to face Arman Tsarukyan at UFC 311. And like I said, Tsarukyan, tough test, good on the feet, but Makhachev's going to beat him for the body of work that he's put in. I think Makhachev beats him pretty comfortably. And then we're going to see Makhachev beat Tsarukyan, staying pound for pound number 1. And then he's probably going to face either Ilia Topuria or Charles Oliveira. If he faces Topuria, I think he takes him down and submits him. I'm going to be completely honest. I just think his wrestling's too much for Topuria. And if we look at Topuria's record as well, the only grappler he's recently fought is Bryce Mitchell. Apart from that, he's just basically been facing strikers. So to go from that to a guy who's heavier than you in Islam Makhachev is way too big of a step up. Not too big of a step up, but it's like night and day. So I'm picking Makhachev to beat Topuria. And if it's Makhachev versus Volk 2, like I said, Makhachev completely dominated the first fight in every aspect of MMA. I don't see why he wouldn't do it again despite the adjustments that Oliveira has made. So I think Makhachev beats Oliveira, and then he's going to beat Topuria, and he will end off the year a 3rd time in a row as pound for pound number 1 in the world. But yeah, that is going to be my pound for pound list for UFC top 15 in 2025 by the end of 2025. Let me know if you agree or disagree, if you had to change any placements around and what you think about this list. But thank you for watching.